Michael, I kept thinking about the argument that President Biden made when he was candidate Biden about why he ought to be elected, right? Crisis at home, crisis abroad. You think about the railroad strike that we just went through this potential of this past week. You think about what he has in this week ahead of him. How do you see this moment for this president?
Well, if you talk to him, and I have, and others have, and a lot of us have, you say, why did you run for president in 2020? And he will say, after Charlottesville, when I saw those Nazis marching and saying Jews will not replace us and threatening fascism, he said, I really have to run, even though he had not necessarily been planning to do that. And, just take a look last night at that Trump rally, Alicia, in Youngstown, Ohio, with people with the straight arm salute. That was something that harked back to the 1930s. Here Joe Biden is in London talking about the Queen. Remember when Donald Trump was there seeing the Queen? He made a point of rudely walking in front of her in public, which is about the biggest violation of protocol you can make. That's not an accidental, act of rudeness. It was something that he was expressing himself. So what Joe Biden seems to be doing is to say, midterm election this year, usually these are decided on local issues. I want to nationalize it. The biggest issue facing Americans is the danger to democracy. And that shows up in polls, including our own NBC poll, Alicia. So I think what we're going to see is both in his trip to London, what he says to the UN, and also what we hear from him this fall. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but John Kennedy used to say, I don't want the 1960s to be the era which the tide ran out for the United States. I think Joe Biden will say, I don't want this to be the midterm election in which the tide ran out for democracy.
It is so interesting to me how people have made the historical comparison when we're seeing migrants be shipped by Republican governors to blue states, to the so-called reverse freedom rides of the 1960s. And I wonder, when we look back on this moment in history, how history is going to judge those Republican governors.
I think what history will say will be that in Florida and in Texas, I was so interesting, that interview that you had, and what you were talking about is Cuban Americans in Florida saying, this authoritarianism and ugliness reminds me of one person, Fidel Castro. This is what we left Cuba to escape. And that is very much outside the American tradition. So when Joe Biden talks about the danger of semi-fascism, take a look at some of these candidates. Mastriano in Pennsylvania, what he said about Jewish people and the need for a more authoritarian society. That's true of other Republican senator and governor candidates. And I don't want to make this a partisan thing, but it is rare that you have, especially a midterm election, where one side says we're for democracy and the other side says a number of things. We're indifferent, or we don't think the threat is great, or maybe we don't need democracy at all.
Michael Beschloss, I could talk to you all day. One day, why don't you just come here, sit with me?
Love it.
We'll make it the entire show. Done. Around a holiday. It's
Got
perfect.
Love nothing better. Thank you.
Michael Beschloss, as always, thank you.